The front door of my own home opened before I could even ring the doorbell. I was standing on my front porch in Fayetteville, North Carolina, at 4:47 in the afternoon on a Thursday in October, still wearing my Army combat uniform after 14 months in Afghanistan, holding a small green duffel bag in one hand and my 7-year-old son's stuffed lion in the other. A woman I had never seen before opened my front door. She was in her early 40s, wearing a cream-colored blazer, holding a clipboard and a set of house keys, my house keys, in her manicured hand. She looked at me. She looked at my uniform. She looked at the duffel bag. She said, "I'm sorry. Are you here for the 4 o'clock showing? You're a little late." I said, "Ma'am, this is my house." Behind her, in what should have been my living room, I heard my husband's voice say, casually, cheerfully, the way a man talks when he thinks his wife is still 7,000 miles away. "Karen, tell them the master bedroom is the best feature." Karen, the realtor, turned pale. The front door opened wider behind her. My husband David stepped into the doorway. And then, from the black staff car that had just pulled up to the curb behind me, the deep voice of a man I had served under for 8 years said, "Major Sinclair, am I early for the promotion ceremony?" Everyone froze. The 4 stars on his shoulders caught the afternoon sun. The homecoming. "My name is Claire Sinclair. I am 38 years old. I am a major in the United States Army, stationed at Fort Bragg, recently renamed Fort Liberty, in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I have served in the Army for 14 years. I have deployed 3 times. My most recent deployment ended, at least on paper, at 11:47 that morning at Pope Field, when I stepped off a C-17 with 143 other soldiers returning from Bagram. I want to tell you what I was thinking when I stepped off that plane. I was thinking about my son. His name is Ethan. He is 7 years old. He was 5 when I left. He is the reason I signed up for this deployment, because his father David and I had agreed, before I left, that this would be my last one. 14 months of Afghanistan, then I would come home, take the promotion I had been offered to Lieutenant Colonel, and transition to a training command at Fort Bragg that would keep me in North Carolina for the next 4 years. Ethan would have his mother home for every soccer practice, every school play, every birthday for the rest of his childhood. I had spent 14 months writing letters to my son. I had spent 14 months writing shorter emails to my husband. I did not, at that moment on the tarmac, understand what that meant. But I would understand it in about 4 hours. I want to describe David to you, because you need to understand the man I was married to before you understand what he had done. David Sinclair is 41 years old. He is a civilian. He worked, as a mid-level commercial real estate agent in Fayetteville. We met in 2013 at a 4th of July barbecue on base. He was the guest of another officer's wife. He was charming. He was funny. He told me on our first date that he thought military women are the strongest people in America. I married him in 2015. Ethan was born in 2017. I want to be honest about our marriage. It had not been good for the last 3 years. David had, since Ethan was about 4, become quietly resentful of my career. He did not say it directly. He said it through small comments, through forgotten Skype calls during my deployments, through the way he would say, when we spoke on the phone, "Ethan asked where his mother is again today," as if I were on vacation. I had, throughout this deployment, told myself that things would get better once I was home for good. They would not get better. At Pope Field that morning, my battle buddy Rachel, Captain Rachel Ortiz, who had been my closest friend for 6 deployments, hugged me at the gate. She said, "Claire, your ride's still not here?" I said, "Rachel." David texted this morning. He said the truck broke down. He's picking up an Uber. He'll be here by 2. Rachel looked at me for a long moment. She said, "Claire, do you want me to drive you home?" I said, "Rachel, he'll be here. It's fine." Rachel did not push it. At 2:47 p.m., 47 minutes passed when David said he would arrive, I called an Uber myself. The driver was a retired Air Force sergeant. He recognized my rank patches. He would not accept my payment. He drove me the 23 miles from Pope Field to our house on Meadowlark Drive in Haymount, one of the older neighborhoods of Fayetteville. He dropped me off at 4:41 p.m. I stood on the sidewalk in front of my own house for approximately 6 minutes before I walked up to the porch. I want to explain why I stood there. There was a small sign in my front yard. It was a professional real estate sign, in navy blue and gold, that said, Open House, Sunday 1:04 p.m., Carolina Homes Realty, Karen Vance, listing agent. Below that, on a small rider just listed, $487,000. I stared at the sign. I want to describe what I felt. I did not, in that moment, feel anger. I felt the specific dislocated feeling of a soldier who has stepped off a plane after 14 months and cannot yet trust that what she is seeing is real. I thought, for a full minute, that I had walked up to the wrong house. I checked the address on my phone. It was my address. I looked at the sign again. The photograph on the sign was my house. The photograph was of the front porch I was standing on. I walked up to the porch. I noticed, as I walked, that the small brass Sinclair family nameplate that David and I had picked out together in 2015 was no longer beside the front door. I noticed that the wreath I had made for Ethan's 5th birthday was gone from the porch rail. I noticed that the ceramic planter that had held my grandmother's rosebush was gone from the front steps. The house had been staged. For sale. I raised my hand to ring the doorbell of my own home, and the front door opened before I touched it. Karen Vance, listing agent for Carolina Homes Realty, stepped onto my porch with a set of keys in one hand and a clipboard in the other. She was mid-conversation with someone inside. My husband David, whose voice I could hear from the living room, saying, "Karen, tell them the master bedroom is the best feature," when she turned toward me and saw the uniform. She looked at me the way people look at a soldier they were not expecting to see, at the address on their clipboard. She said, "I'm sorry. Are you here for the 4 o'clock showing? You're a little late." I said, "Ma'am, this is my house." She said, "I'm sorry?" I said, "This is my house. I own this house. I have owned this house since 2015. I'm returning from a 14-month deployment. My name is Claire Sinclair. My name is on the deed." Karen Vance said nothing for approximately 4 seconds. Then David appeared in the doorway behind her. He was holding a glass of white wine. He was wearing a shirt I did not recognize. He was in his sock feet in the middle of a Thursday afternoon in what should have been my house. He saw me. His face, I want to describe his face, did not go pale. It did not flush. It did not react at all. For approximately 2 seconds, he looked at me the way a man looks at a fact that he has, in some corner of his mind, been preparing for. Then he said, very quietly, "Claire, you're early." I was not early. I was, per the deployment schedule his phone contained, exactly on time. And behind me, at that exact moment, a black U.S. Army staff car pulled up to the curb of my house. The driver's side door opened. A tall man in Army service dress uniform stepped out, 4 stars on each shoulder. He looked at the real estate sign in my front yard. He looked at me on the porch. He looked at David in the doorway. Then he said, in the calm voice I had first heard 8 years ago when he pinned my captain's bars, "Major Sinclair, am I early for the promotion ceremony?" The general. I want to tell you about the man who stepped out of that staff car, because he is the entire second half of this story. His name is General Robert Whitmore. He is 62 years old. He is a 4-star general in the United States Army. He is, at the time of this story, the commanding general of United States Army Forces Command, headquartered at Fort Bragg. He is responsible, in his official capacity, for the operational readiness of approximately 776,000 soldiers. He is one of the 12 most senior officers in the entire United States Army. He is also a man who has known me since I was a 24-year-old second lieutenant. In 2017, the year my son was born, then Colonel Whitmore was my battalion commander during my first deployment to Iraq. In 2019, he was the officer who selected me for a specialized intelligence support program that fast-tracked my career. In 2021, when I was promoted to major, he pinned the oak leaves on my collar himself, at a small ceremony at Fort Campbell in Kentucky. I had, 3 weeks before I stepped off that C-17 at Pope Field, received an email from General Whitmore's aide-de-camp informing me that the general wished to personally attend a small ceremony at my home upon my return from Afghanistan. The ceremony was to be a symbolic pinning of my new rank, Lieutenant Colonel, which I had been selected for approximately 4 months into my deployment. The formal ceremony would happen later, at Fort Liberty in November. But General Whitmore, per the email, wanted to be at my home on the day I returned, to pin the new rank on me himself, in front of my husband and my son, as a personal gesture of respect. The ceremony was scheduled for 5 p.m. on Thursday, October 17th. At 5 p.m. on Thursday, October 17th, a 4-star general of the United States Army stepped out of a staff car in front of my house and saw a for sale sign in my front yard. He looked at me on the porch. He looked at David in the doorway holding a glass of wine. He looked at Karen Vance with her clipboard. He looked at the small brass plate that was missing from beside my front door. He said, in a voice that was, I have to be honest, the calmest and quietest I had ever heard him, "Major Sinclair, would you like to tell me what is happening here?" I could not, for a moment, speak. Behind David, in the doorway, another figure appeared. She was a woman in her early 30s. She was blonde. She was wearing a silk blouse that was, I now noticed, one of the items I had left in my closet when I deployed. She was holding a second glass of white wine. She looked at me on the porch. She looked at the general. She looked at David. She said, in the specific frozen voice of a woman who has, at that exact moment, understood that her life has just changed, "David, who is she?" David did not answer her. Karen Vance turned to David. She said, in a professional voice that was working very hard not to break, "Mr. Sinclair, I need to understand something. You told me your wife had signed the listing agreement. You told me she was, I believe your exact words, currently living out of state, and had authorized the sale. Is that accurate?" David said nothing. Karen said, "Mr. Sinclair, I need an answer. Because if the deed on this property is held jointly and your wife has not signed the listing agreement..." I stepped forward. I said, "Ma'am, I have not signed anything. I have been in Afghanistan for 14 months. I own this house. My name is on the deed. I have not authorized anything." Karen closed her clipboard. She looked at David. She said, "Mr. Sinclair, I need to speak with you inside, right now." The blonde woman behind David, I would later learn her name was Ashley Prescott, and she was, per what General Whitmore's people would piece together in the following weeks, a paralegal at David's real estate law firm who had been living in my house for approximately 11 months of my 14-month deployment, put her wine glass down on my hallway table. She said, very quietly, "David, what is she talking about?" David finally spoke. He looked at me, at his wife of 10 years, standing on the porch of the house we had bought together, in the uniform I had worn to defend this country for 14 months, and he said, in the exact tone a man uses when he has decided to double down, "Claire, I want you to calm down. This is a business matter. We can discuss it privately." General Whitmore said, from the bottom of the porch steps, "Mr. Sinclair, may I make a suggestion?" David turned to him. The general said, "I would suggest you do not use the word calm in a sentence directed at your wife. Not right now, not on this porch, not in front of me. Do you understand what I am telling you?" David did not answer. The general took one step up onto the porch. He said, "Major Sinclair, where is your son?" I said, "Sir, he should be at school. He gets picked up at 3:15. He should have been home by 3:45. General Whitmore looked at David. He said, "Mr. Sinclair, where is Ethan Sinclair right now?" David said, He's at my mother's house. She picked him up. She's keeping him overnight while Karen shows the house this week." General Whitmore said, "So your 7-year-old son does not know his mother is home from a 14-month deployment?" David said nothing. General Whitmore turned to me. He said, "Major Sinclair, I would like to accompany you to your mother-in-law's residence to retrieve your son. I would like to do this now. My staff car is at the curb. Will you accompany me?" I said, "Sir, yes." The general turned to Karen Vance. He said, "Ms. Vance, before you leave this property, I would strongly suggest you preserve every document related to this listing, every text message with Mr. Sinclair, every email, every voicemail, and I would suggest you contact your broker of record tonight, because there is a very high probability that you are, at this moment, in the middle of a real estate fraud that will involve the North Carolina Real Estate Commission, the U.S. Department of Justice, and the Service Members Civil Relief Act. Do you understand?" Karen Vance said, "Yes, sir, yes." The general looked at Ashley Prescott. He said, "Ma'am, I do not know who you are. I do not need to know. But I would suggest you gather your belongings from this residence and leave within the next 15 minutes. Do you understand? Ashley Prescott began to cry. The general looked at David. He said, "Mr. Sinclair, stay here. I will be back." David said, "Sir, General." I was going to tell her. General Whitmore said, "Mr. Sinclair, you had 14 months. He extended his elbow to me. I put my hand through his arm. I walked off my own porch, past the for sale sign in my own front yard, and I got into the back of a 4-star general staff car. We drove to Barbara Sinclair's house to get my son. The son, the fraud, and the hearing. Barbara Sinclair, my mother-in-law, lived in a small yellow ranch house in Hope Mills, about 12 minutes south of Fayetteville. She was 64 years old. She had, in the 10 years I had known her, said perhaps 50 words directly to me. She had, at my wedding, told a mutual friend that she thought David was settling. We pulled up to her house at 5:47 p.m. The staff car, a large black Chevrolet Suburban with government plates and a small 4-star flag on the front fender, did not go unnoticed on Barbara's street. 3 of her neighbors came out onto their porches. General Whitmore got out. He walked around and opened my door. He said, "Major, do you want me to come to the door with you, or do you want to go alone?" I said, "Sir, please come with me." We walked up to the front door together. I rang the bell. Barbara Sinclair opened the door. She was wearing an apron. She smelled like the specific casserole she made every Thursday. Behind her, in the living room, I could see my son Ethan sitting on the couch watching cartoons with his back to the door. Barbara saw me. Her mouth opened. She looked at the general. She looked at his rank. She looked back at me. She said, in the voice of a woman who had, at that exact moment, understood that the plan was over, "Claire, you're home." I said, "Barbara, where is my son?" Ethan turned around on the couch. He was 7 years old. He was wearing a small army t-shirt that I had sent him from Afghanistan 6 months earlier, in a care package with the message, "I'll be home before this shirt is too small." The shirt was too small. He stared at me for approximately 2 seconds. Then he said, in a voice I will remember for the rest of my life, "Mama?" I dropped to my knees in Barbara Sinclair's doorway, in full Army combat uniform, in the middle of a Thursday afternoon in October, and I opened my arms. My son ran across the living room. He hit me at full speed. He did not say anything else for approximately 4 minutes. He held onto my neck so tightly that I could feel his heartbeat against my collarbone. General Whitmore stepped, quietly, back onto the porch. He gave us that moment. I want to be honest. A 4-star general of the United States Army stood on the porch of a small yellow ranch house in Hope Mills, North Carolina, and gave a returning soldier and her son 4 minutes of privacy. At approximately 5:53 p.m., I gently detached Ethan from my neck. I said, "Buddy, I need you to grab your backpack. We're going home tonight." Ethan said, "Mama, am I dreaming?" I said, "No, sweetheart. This is real. Grab your backpack." He grabbed his backpack. I turned to Barbara Sinclair. I said, "Barbara, I want to be very clear with you. I do not want to have a conversation with you tonight. I do not want an explanation. I do not want an apology. What I want, at this exact moment, is my son, my son's overnight bag, and the ability to walk out of this house without hearing your voice." Barbara Sinclair began to cry. She said, "Claire, David told me." I said, "Barbara, please." She was silent. Ethan came back with his backpack and his stuffed lion, the one I had left with him 14 months earlier, which he had, per what I would later learn, slept with every single night I was gone. We walked out of Barbara Sinclair's house. General Whitmore opened the back door of the Suburban. Ethan looked at the flag on the fender. He said, "Mama, whose car is this?" I said, "Ethan, this is General Whitmore's car. He is Mommy's boss." Ethan looked up at the general. He said, "Sir, are you higher than a major?" General Whitmore knelt down. He said, "Son, I am 4 ranks higher than a major." Ethan said, "Whoa." General Whitmore said, "I have been trying to figure out how to explain to your mother that she is being promoted to lieutenant colonel next month. Do you know what that means?" Ethan said, "It means she gets more stripes?" The general smiled. He said, "It means she gets a silver oak leaf. And it means the next time you come to visit her at Fort Liberty, you will be visiting a very, very important officer of the United States Army. Do you understand?" Ethan said, "Yes, sir." The general stood up. He looked at me. He said, "Major, your son is now the fourth-ranking person in this vehicle." I laughed. For the first time in 14 months, I laughed. We drove to my sister-in-law's house, my brother's wife Diana, who lived in a large colonial on the north side of Fayetteville, where my brother James, a retired Coast Guard officer, opened the door before we finished parking. James looked at the general. He said, "Claire, what happened?" I said, "James, I'll tell you inside, but my son and I need to sleep here tonight." James said, "Claire, you can sleep here as long as you need to sleep here." General Whitmore came inside for exactly 15 minutes. He shook my brother's hand. He accepted a cup of coffee. He wrote 3 phone numbers on the back of a business card and handed them to me. One was a civilian family law attorney in Raleigh. One was the Army's Judge Advocate General office at Fort Liberty. The third, the number he tapped when he handed it to me, was his personal cell phone. He said, "Major, I want you to call me tomorrow morning, at any time, but before 10 a.m. Do you understand?" I said, "Sir, yes." He said, "Major, one more thing." I said, "Sir?" He said, "The promotion ceremony will happen. It will happen at Fort Liberty in November. It will not happen on your porch. It will happen in the location it should have happened. Do you understand?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Good." He left. I want to walk you through, briefly, what General Whitmore's staff, with the help of my brother James, the Army JAG office, the North Carolina Real Estate Commission, and a civilian attorney named Patricia Whitfield, pieced together over the next 4 weeks. David Sinclair had, approximately 6 months into my deployment, contacted Karen Vance at Carolina Homes Realty and initiated the listing of our home. He had told Karen, in writing, in emails that Karen preserved, that his wife was currently living out of state, working a civilian job in Colorado, and had authorized the sale, but was unavailable to appear in person. He had forged my signature on the listing agreement. He had, in fact, forged my signature on 3 separate documents. Under the Service Members Civil Relief Act, a federal statute that protects deployed service members from exactly this kind of civilian legal action, David's actions constituted federal real estate fraud, forgery, and violation of a federally protected class. He had also, per the financial forensics my attorney conducted, drained approximately $67,000 from our joint savings account over the 14 months of my deployment. The money had been transferred, in small amounts, to a personal account he had opened at a different bank. Ashley Prescott had received approximately $23,000 of it in the form of consulting fees that were, per Ashley's own eventual testimony, payments for her cooperation in the house sale. David was arrested on federal fraud charges on November 4th. Ashley Prescott was not charged, in exchange for her testimony. Karen Vance's real estate license was suspended, then reinstated after she cooperated fully with the investigation. Barbara Sinclair, my mother-in-law, sent me a handwritten letter in December. It was 4 pages long. I read the first page. I did not read the other 3. I have not spoken to her since. After, I want to tell you what happened over the next 12 months because it matters. My promotion ceremony to Lieutenant Colonel took place at Fort Liberty on November 19th. The ceremony was held in the small chapel on base, the one that faces the parade ground, where new officers have been commissioned since 1918. General Whitmore pinned the silver oak leaves on my collar himself. My son Ethan sat in the front row. He was 7 years old. He was wearing a small suit that my sister-in-law Diana had bought him. He held his stuffed lion in his lap the entire ceremony. When General Whitmore finished pinning the second oak leaf, Ethan stood up on his chair. His aunt did not stop him, and he saluted me. I saluted him back. I heard, from the back of the chapel, my brother James start to cry. The divorce was finalized in March. Under North Carolina law, the marital fraud, the forgery, and the drained savings account resulted in a settlement that returned the full value of the fraudulently listed home to me, along with restitution of the stolen funds, along with sole physical and legal custody of Ethan. David received supervised visitation, contingent on completion of the federal fraud sentence and mandatory family counseling. David served 14 months in federal prison. I do not know where he is now. I do not particularly care. I sold the house on Meadowlark Drive in April. I could not, after everything, sleep in the bedroom where Ashley Prescott had slept. I bought a smaller house, a 3-bedroom brick colonial in a quiet neighborhood near Fort Liberty, with the settlement funds. Ethan has his own room. The room has an Army-themed wall that Ethan designed himself, with photographs of me from every deployment. He has, above his bed, a small framed print of my new rank insignia, the silver oak leaves, that General Whitmore mailed to him personally in December, with a note that said, "Ethan, your mom is one of the finest officers in the United States Army. When you grow up, I hope you remember that. General R. Whitmore." Ethan is 9 years old now. He is in 3rd grade. He plays soccer on Saturday mornings. He has, per his 2nd grade teacher's report from last spring, told the class 3 separate times that his mother protects the country from bad guys and also makes really good pancakes. I have transitioned to the training command position at Fort Liberty. I am home every night by 5:30 p.m. I make Ethan's dinner. I help him with his homework. I sit with him while he does his reading before bed. I have not, in the 22 months since I stepped off that C-17 at Pope Field, missed a single soccer game. General Whitmore retired from the Army in June. His retirement ceremony was held at the Pentagon. I flew up for it. Ethan came with me. He wore his same small suit. He was, by then, 9 years old, and the suit was slightly too tight. At the reception after the ceremony, General Whitmore introduced Ethan to the Secretary of the Army. He said, "Mr. Secretary, this is Ethan Sinclair. He is Lieutenant Colonel Sinclair's son. He is, per his mother, the reason she still shows up for work." The Secretary of the Army shook Ethan's hand. Ethan said, "Sir, my mom protects the country." The Secretary of the Army said, "Son, she does, and so did the man standing next to you." General Whitmore had, per what he would tell me in a quiet conversation later that afternoon, retired specifically so that he could take a position on the board of a nonprofit that supports the families of deployed service members who have experienced fraud or abandonment during deployment. The nonprofit, per his description, was in the very early stages. It did not yet have a name. He asked me if I would be willing, when I retire from the Army in 7 years, to consider joining the board. I said yes. The name of the nonprofit, he told me later, would be the Returning Home Foundation. Its first fundraising event will be held at Fort Liberty next spring. I will be a keynote speaker. Ethan has already told me, per his 2nd grade teacher's most recent report, that he plans to give the invocation. He is 9. The Army says he cannot give the invocation. I have told him he can give the closing remarks instead. He is, at this moment, working on his speech. If you have ever been the woman who came home to a house that was not the home you left, if you have ever stood on your own front porch in the uniform you wore to serve this country and realized that someone you loved had built a life without you while you were gone, I want you to leave one word in the comments below. Just one word. The name of the base you left from, or the name of the country you returned from, or the name of the person who was waiting when you finally got home. Say the word. Because someone in this comment section is going to see your word, and they are going to remember that the woman in the uniform is almost always the woman holding the house together. And if this story reminded you that the person you serve alongside eventually becomes the person who shows up for you, subscribe. Because next week, I am telling you about a stepmother who told the lawyer I had nothing. The trust was in my name. I'll see you there.